The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Today's episode is Rising from the Ashes of Loss.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Created in the Image of God. Normally on this Sunday morning show, it's pre-recorded. You'll hear it in my voice a little bit. I'm up early. I'm in Central Time. I'm not sure where you're tuning in from. Our guest is on Pacific Time, so it's even earlier for him. But we scheduled this live because he was going on a week-long silent retreat during the time when we would have normally pre-recorded the show, and he agreed graciously to do this show live. So Michael Stone his life has been marked by unthinkable loss, which he's had to process and turn into the grist for the mill, if you will, of the soul work that he engages in. And coming off this retreat is just really an ideal time to talk to him and to let him unpack what that is and how he helps and serves the divine here on earth. Welcome to the studio, Michael.
Wade, it's good to be with you.
Well, it's my pleasure. I've really been looking forward to this one. Your path has been, so dramatic, and such learning and wisdom has come from that. And also the work that you do is work that I'm frankly not all that familiar with. And I really look forward to learning along with our guests this morning. So let's start by, in the first segment, we always go back into your own creation story and background, but I'm sure the guests are curious about that week-long retreat as well. We'll get into it in more detail a little later when we talk about where you're at now and where you're going. But just give us a synopsis of why not talk for a week?
Why not talk? There's enough chatter in the world. That's why. Contemplation, meditation, and prayer have been at the heart of my work, and of course at the heart of the spiritual work forever. And to take time out of our day, or take a week out to slow down, to soften, and to tune in to our inner GPS, our connection with spirit, with God. And so I think it's essential at the speed is escalating in time. AI and social media are expanding at just unbelievable exponential rates right now. And it's keeping us moving very fast. And in order to really look at what's really important in my life, and what am I giving to the world, and what am I receiving, and what do I have to give, and how do I grow to be a better human being, we have to slow down and take time out to ground ourselves, to connect more deeply with our body, with our inner GPS, with our emotions, and with the bigger picture of life and the beauty of the mystery.
Well, like I said, a little bit later in the show, we'll unpack specifically this retreat and what you drew from that. But let's dive into your creation story. We talked just briefly before the show about the era in which you came to be. Tell us about what it was like growing up Michael Stone, the where and the where it was, the environment you were in, the parents you had, and those forces that shaped you before you took conscious thought to become who you are today.
I love that you frame it as the creation story. I'm very interested in creation story and stories, at the heart of all tribes of the world through all time has always been, there's a central creation story. What is it that brings us into the world? And as an individual creation story, mine was marked by, started out before I was even born, by war. Both my parents were at Pearl Harbor. My father was a fighter pilot. They didn't get any planes off the ground that day. My mother worked for the commander of the Pacific Fleet. They were both in the military and heavily impacted by that. My mother, who was, one of the first women to graduate from Stanford University, she was a very gentle soul, and it was just too much to be in the middle of the bombing and the chaos. And over the first couple of years, she was delusional. She thought that it basically tried to kill me many times, putting a pillow over my face, or they had to take a knife away from her several times. And she was under a, therapy in those days and psychology was just really at its infancy, and they didn't know what to do. At 2.5, I found her hanging. She had taken her own life, and no one in the family would ever speak of her again. So in the 40s, that was a time when mental illness was a deep shame. And so, I found her in my 20s in an unmarked grave in San Francisco with 3 other people. No tombstone, no nothing. And she came from a wealthy family. So, and my father, on the other hand, was just absence. Between the war and the loss of my mother, he was a drinker, he was a womanizer, he was absent, basically. So I kind of floated around a lot in my early childhood. First, I had a stepmother that my father had actually divorced to marry my mother, and had had another child with, and not knowing what to do with me after I was shipped around for a number of years, was dropped off at this woman's house, who was a raving alcoholic. And again, a lot of abuse, a lot of noise. Then I had actually a very happy time. My father came and got me. It was the first I really knew much about him, and took me back to San Francisco. And he opened a bar on Maiden Lane, right in the
How
middle of.
old were you when your father took you to San Francisco with him?
I was then 4, yeah, just early
Okay.
4, mid 4, something like that. Getting close to 5. I can't remember the exact specifics, but we lived in a bar for a year, and it was the happiest time of my life. My father was there. All of his girlfriends would be vying to take care of me. I was better than a dog at attracting women, and I slept in the bar most of the time, in the dining room, and that was a pretty happy time because I was with my father, and but I really longed for a mother's love. I never had that. That was a deep longing for me most of my life. And then my father divorced her a second time. He had married her, and then suddenly said he was
Married her. This is the
married.
one.
There was the first wife, and then it was my mother, and then he remarried the first wife.
Got it. So
Uh,
the one that you had the stepbrother with,
right.
or
So
the half
it,
brother, I
it's,
assume.
right. His third marriage was also the first marriage.
Got it. Okay.
Confusing, right? The same woman, who was a very wealthy woman. So
During this time, what was your relationship like with your half brother?
oh, it was terrible. He was 3 years older than me. If anything happened, I was usually blamed for it, no matter what happened. And he used that to his advantage a lot. So I
Mm-hmm.
was in trouble a lot. And, I was living with a raging alcoholic. I remember her throwing a bottle of vodka at the television and having it blow up, and pretty scary. A lot of scary things in that house in Hawaii. It was up on the top of a mountain in Hawaii overlooking a big palatial place. She lived on Kalawahini Drive, which is called Rich Lady Drive.
Is that on the island of Oahu?
Yeah, it's overlooking Oahu actually, and the
Yeah.
whole Diamond Head and the whole Pacific. So
Okay.
it was a beautiful scene in a horrible, scary place. And yeah, so not to get into too much detail, so there was the bar, and then my father re-entered the Air Force. He was offered a commission back in the Air Force, so he decided to go back into the Air Force, and then immediately left this pretty nice place, plus in San Francisco, plus my grandparents and my aunt that I was close to were there, and all of a sudden we were off back to New York again, which we had been going back and forth, and then out of the blue, I went through sexual abuse with a caregiver, so just a lot of stuff, you know. At 7, I got a dog. It was my whole world. Really calmed me down because I was very hyperactive and troublemaker, according to my parents anyway, or my father. And then this new stepmother, and the stepmother, this is lovely. Dickens would have loved that. The name of my stepmother was Jean Severe. So I think that's a great name for a stepmother. You know, Dickens would have paid money for that one. And then, like I
Yeah.
said, then I had this really stern, harsh stepmother, uh, and my father married her and dropped me off and left me for 2 years with her and her family. So that was another kind of trauma. And then we moved to California, and I got a dog, like I was saying, and that was a great time. And I love this dog. And my stepmother tied the dog up. I came home from school and found it hanging on the fence. It had tried to follow me to school. That was because you know it was that was at 7, so that was a huge thing for me, even more than my mother was just incomprehensible at that age, and even though I found her, no one would ever talk about her. Um, so that then we went through that, and you know. Um, Things went along. I was quite a rebel. I was drinking and smoking before I was 10. Had, you know, very addictive behavior. Uh, then I went out and I traveled all around the world, hitchhiked to Europe, to, you know, the East Coast, went to Europe, traveled all over Europe. That was a beautiful time.
Were
Of
you
kind
in
of,
your 20s during that time?
I was in my 20s in that time. And
So, did you
actually, yeah,
graduate?
the
So
first time,
graduated.
the first time I went to a year of college, and then I left. So I was actually 19 to 21,
Got it.
living in Europe. And the draft board was after me, and I finally, you know, went back, spent 2 years in the Army. Had a lot of loss there in that because I went to military schools all my life, I forgot to add that. So I was brought up pretty much in military schools. And when I went into the Army, they put me in charge of a platoon because of all the years of military ROTC training. And then my unit was being sent to Vietnam, and to get away from that, I went to officer candidate school. But then my entire unit pretty much was wiped out, and I had horrible. I never talked about it for many years until on my radio show, I had a Veterans Day celebration and honoring veterans, and you know, I called the psychologist that I worked with, Ed Tick. I said, Ed, I don't think I can do this show. I've never talked about this, but you know, all the people that I was responsible for pretty much were wiped out, and I, you know, was saved by ending up in Korea, and that was a heavy weight on me of shame that I carried, survivor guilt, I guess you call it. But you know, in the early 70s, I went to the S training, and And I had this realization after the first weekend. I was walking out on the street, and the lights were very bright, and I was just very awake. And I had this thought: you mean I'm responsible for my own life? It was a huge thing. I'd never occurred to me. That sounds silly, but it was a huge epiphany. And that really started me on the healing journey. And I was reading books like Hermann Hesse and Thomas Merton and the San Juan.
Before we leave that background and your father and growing up in military school, I was just curious, did you ever read that book, The War Lover by Hersey?
No, I didn't. I never did. I don't remember it.
Yeah, I remember reading that many years ago. It was really powerful. And just hearing about your life and childhood, as I was curious. Anyway, go on.
Yeah.
So you were
Yeah.
reading.
So the next big thing in my life was I was ADHD. I didn't know what that was at the time. Didn't have a name, but I, was drinking fairly heavily still. Social drinker. Like my father was kind of a what do you call it, functional alcoholic, and drinking, a couple pots of coffee a day and smoking 3 packs a day and running 3 different businesses. And I was running fast to try to not feel the things that I had suppressed, basically. And then met a beautiful woman and was married. And we had an incredible relationship. And then we got pregnant, and that was very hard on us. And I lost my job at the same time. And in the middle of that, Sonia, my wife, was raped and murdered in 1981. And of course, that all of a sudden, I'm the father of a 4-year-old, single father, and pretty lost. Luckily, I had a child to take care of, because I probably would have drank myself to death at that point. And that really saved me, and it started me on my spiritual journey. And I've been practicing meditation, like we mentioned earlier, and devotional kinds of things for many years. So that's kind of the story. And then here we are today, and I just turned 80 years old.
So I had also heard that you had a daughter, but was it just a son, also a daughter,
No,
or
just a daughter, one child.
okay, I
Yeah,
misunderstood.
she was 4.5 when her mother was killed.
And the part of the story that we didn't mention was that you lived under suspicion, because it's in that sense natural and normal that because so many things happen with close family members, but that suspicion dragged on for 40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. I was only a suspect for the first day of the investigation. The police knew who did it. They were very clear they had the right person. But the trial went south for lots of reasons. The person was arrested on a traffic warrant, so they threw out all the evidence. The picture with the scratches on his face then disappeared. The parents lied and said that he didn't have scratches on his face when it happened. It was just a mess. And so there was a mistrial. It was 9-3. 9 votes for guilty, but 3 not guilty. And here you have to have 100% guilty. So that dragged on. My daughter, bless her soul, was kept on top of it and kept saying things to the police. And finally, I was living in Canada because the gossip and slander had really gotten out of hand. Uh, um, a person that I knew started it and spread it to somebody that was a powerful uh, person. Both of them had very traumatic childhoods, and they started saying these things. And people, not, I was pretty well known in the community, so most people that I knew better, but a lot of people believe the story. So I actually left for Canada. I'm a dual citizen, and I went to Canada and lived for 7 years. And then one day I got a call saying, "Hello, this is Officer Wilson, and we want you to know that we're reopening your wife's case, and we've got some money to track DNA evidence." And lo and behold, I came back to California and took a year to do the trial, year and a half. And finally, the trial was, uh, it's interesting, the odds when they talk about DNA, it was 426 quadrillion to 1 that it was him. So, and 3 people from the Department of Justice. So it was pretty conclusive. And at that point, Sonia's brother came up and apologized because the family had believed that it was me too.
Wow.
And said he'd been carrying it all these years, and that was beautiful. They actually caught that on camera, and it was a very big moment for me. But I've continued to do my work.
So her killer was still alive and able to be. He ended up, I assume, in jail.
Life without parole. He's
Yeah.
serving now. Life without parole. He never admitted to it. He never spoke during the trial. Of course, they tried to pin it on me in the trial, and
Right.
luckily the judge wasn't having any of it. But they pulled that old card and created more gossip by calling people and saying they were investigating me in the murder
Right.
trial. So yeah, so it was a very bittersweet, um, freeing, with finally having been exonerating, but having spent all these years with this shadow. But when I put it into perspective, I was healthy. I was making a difference with the work I was doing. Um,
Well,
and
let's put a pin in it there and go to that commercial break to show what that work is. And when we come back, we'll talk more about your work, how all of this story plays into that, and get to
thanks.
know a little bit more about the depth of what you're doing.
Yeah.
We're on Created in the Image of God, talking to Michael Stone. We'll be right back after this short commercial break about Michael Stone.
For over 50 years, Michael Stone has walked the path of transformation, teaching, guiding, and holding space in circles across the world. Author, teacher, shamanic practitioner, and trauma integration facilitator, his work bridges ancient practices with modern healing. In his newest release, Traumatized, Michael opens a path to transform our deepest wounds through love, the force that unites us all. Michael Stone is a guide for those ready to awaken, to heal, and to remember the power of connection. His journey is an invitation to step into wholeness and to walk it together. Discover more at welloflight.com.
So, Michael, we talked a little bit about at the retreat and what that did for you. Tell us a little bit about how all of this plays together in the work you do and your path of helping others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to start by saying that, I've had a lot of trauma, but I'm also a white privileged male living in the United States. And, when I look at the state of the world and the suffering that's there, I'm deeply moved, and I don't feel I was so bad off, at least this point in my life. I long ago gave up being a victim of life, and really bow down to the sacred and the fact that I'm alive and I have an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. So, I went back to school. I got a number of different degrees and became an organizational development consultant. So I started doing transformational work in organizations for 30 some years. And I love that work. and some things happened. I ended up leaving that work, but I had gotten very interested in shamanism and the mystical arts as ways of healing myself and healing others. And so I kind of had this side vocation, which was working a lot with soul retrieval. And what is it? What is soul retrieval? And how does someone lose their soul? And being the essence, our spirits are essence, our soul. And what was that all about? And I did, on the side, soul retrievals with people for many years, and went to the Amazon and studied with Sandra Ingerman here, and one of my teachers. Um, I have to also say another saving thing along the way is that in the early 70s, I met Gabrielle Roth, and I became a 5 rhythms teacher, which is a moving meditation. And I don't think I would have made it had I not been in my body, because when you have a lot of trauma like that, you leave your body and you suppress your emotions. And we could talk more about trauma in a minute. So that just led me into, I think it was about 10 years ago, I met Thomas Hubel, who has been my teacher ever since. And he said, we're living in a sea of trauma. And I thought, oh my God, all the things I've been doing as an activist, climate change, social justice, I was very active in all those areas. I had a radio show for 17 years. That was the linchpin. We're living in a sea of trauma. And I realized that every issue that we are concerned about, whether it's climate change or income, income disparity, or racism, or you name it, graft in government, and the fall of democracy, all of these things are based in trauma. So I think it's important to recognize that what we think of as trauma is not the way I look at the lens I look at trauma through. So we might want to take a look at what is trauma.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. I was just thinking, and well, I'll withhold my comments and thoughts and just ask questions. So, yeah, what is trauma in your view?
Yeah.
And how is it different from what some might think of when they hear the word trauma?
Yeah. Trauma is the most misunderstood, misdiagnosed source of suffering on the planet. And my lens that I look at through is not as a pathology, a disease, or something to get rid of, but an incredible spiritual intelligence that has been evolving for hundreds of thousands of years to protect us in overwhelming situations. And that's really important, to shift the lens that something's wrong or broken, to recognize, no, this is an intelligence. This is a God-given intelligence that we have, that naturally our nervous system in an overwhelming situation, it fragments a part of our essence, a part of our soul, and gets lodged in the body as tension or as numbness. So it's really an intelligence that when at some point in space and time, something overwhelming happens. It may be abuse as a child, it may be being molested, it may be just the natural, one of the biggest traumas is early childhood development, because that's a key time when we come into the world, although we come in with a lot of baggage, and we can talk about ancestral and legacy burdens. But the early childhood development, that early first few years, if we aren't felt, seen, heard, held, and protected, and have the loving gaze of a caregiver, we never have a chance to self-regulate, to learn how, because we have to learn to self-regulate, to be able to control our emotions and our passions and our ability just to get around in life. If we don't have that early co-regulation, then we don't learn to self-regulate. And so we have a hard time navigating life. When you have trauma, there's the trauma event. When people talk about trauma, they're not talking about the event. It's not the event. It's what happened inside me in that event. what decisions I made, what and how I adapted. So there's the event, there's what happened in me, and then there's the way that I mitigated that I rose to it. For instance, maybe I'm in a household where there was a lot of yelling and screaming, or a divorce, or something like that, and I was scared as a youngster, and I would want to help, but nothing I could do helped. So I became the helper, or I became the smart one, or the good one, or the pretty one, or the rebel. What I took on a particular adaptive style to deal with this overwhelming situation. And that often becomes, here we try to help out our parents, it didn't work, but then I become a doctor or a nurse or a caregiver, and in some way it becomes our profession. Unfortunately, we're driven to do that. So even if it's you become a doctor, say, I think of Gabor Mate, very well known in the trauma field, and how he had early childhood trauma, and he just worked himself into death as an ER doctor, and then and his family suffered from it, and he suffered from it, until he finally woke up and said, "Oh, wait, I'm actually trying to get the love that I didn't get when I was a baby, because his parents had handed him off for a few weeks in the occupation and during World War II." So, um, we grow. Of course, we have that first part that I said is important, the connection with a caring parent. But we grow through uh, fear and safety, fear and safety. So let me give you an example. Let's say there's a little toddler, and he or she is crawling and trying, curious, trying to find something out. And all of a sudden, the dog barks, and the child is scared and runs back and says, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, I'm scared, I'm scared." And mommy's got 5 kids and very busy, and says, "Honey, there's nothing to be scared about. Don't worry about it." Or sometimes say, "Grow up." Well, that's a trauma. We don't realize that. But why is that a trauma? Because an emotional request for "Mommy, I'm scared, help," was answered with a cognitive answer: "Don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of." But the child says, "Well, I'm not supposed to be afraid, but I am afraid. So
Right.
something's wrong." And then we never say something's wrong with our caregiver. We say something's wrong with me. And then that's where the adaptation comes. Whereas if I came and I said, I switched the gender back and forth, it's not gender related, but "Daddy, daddy, daddy, I'm scared, I'm scared. That dog is going to eat me." And daddy says, instead of saying, don't be scared, picks the child up and says, "Sweetheart, it's okay to be scared. You know what? Daddy gets scared sometimes too." And the child goes, "Oh," and goes and plays with the dog and climbs on top of it, and it's all fine. But there's so subtle things like that.
Yeah.
And to then, so what happens here? We have a fragmentation. A part of our essence is lodged in the body as tension or numbness. And then uh, it's so suppressed, it becomes in the unconscious, it comes in the shadow part, so we don't even notice that. And it's not tension or numbness, by the way, it's tensing and numbing. In other words, once that happens, it is going all the time, just like your refrigerator is plugged in to keep the food cold. That tensing and numbing takes a lot of chi dollars, energy dollars,
So
to
yeah.
keep
So I
running.
want to I want to go back a step because this is wonderful and awesome and fascinating, and I love the way you're unpacking it at the cellular level, or the granular level, or the quantum level. Um, we grow through fear and safety, you said, and I'm thinking of oscillating, right? I'm thinking of expansion and consolidation. I'm thinking of breathing in and breathing out. I'm thinking of the two creation stories. You shared your reverence for creation. The cosmic view. God, without touching anything, said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And then in the second creation story, he kneels down and with his own hands shapes us from the dust. of the ground with his own hands. So you've got those two views. What I want to understand is your perspective on the head and the heart, the emotional response that you just talked about, and the cognitive response that you talked about. And at the macro scale, at the global scale, I see people today confused. I see people making cognitively dissonant, heart-based decisions that are grossly hypocritical, right?
Yeah.
You know, supporting somebody who was killed in a hateful act while claiming to be full of love, right?
Yeah.
And you follow me?
Oh,
So,
totally.
so I'm now thinking about, okay, where does this come from? How does that disconnect happen? What is it that was created when we have emotion and we also have cognitive ability, right? Going back to the book of Genesis, the Garden of Eden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then the phrase when God said, "Who told you you were naked?" Right? And it's not like, who let the cat out of the bag? I was trying to keep from you. I was trying to hide from you the fact that you were naked. No, who told you? Who gave you this idea that there was something shameful about the way I created you? Because I created you naked, right?
Well, St. Augustine had a lot to do with that. Well, we won't necessarily go there, but the original sin perspective, which was, of course, a great way to control people and collect taxes. But rather than get into that
Well,
aspect,
no, but I'm getting into the story itself, right? I'm
right.
getting into what is actually going on.
Yeah,
Forget about St. Augustine and his interpretation of it. What is actually going on in that creation
yeah.
story?
Well, that
And the
particular,
head and the heart, the way that God created us with the need to have Daddy say, I'm afraid from time to time too, but also then the cognitive realization that there is actually nothing to be afraid of. You follow me? So
yes, yeah. Well, let me dissect what you're saying. So that actually was a time of great trauma, by the way. And so to understand that, the question you're asking is to understand that trauma, um, the side effects of trauma, number one sense when we have this overwhelming experience and it gets pushed down is that we create a sense of separate self. That you're over there, Wade, and I'm over here in California right now, and we're separate. And of course, that in our identity and looking at that, that's true. But in a much more real sense, actually, you are over here in my nervous system, and I am over there in your nervous system. And that is a connection that is part of the work that I do, is to allow ourselves to soften and open to that recognition. By the way, the second, so a sense of separate self, a sense of scarcity, not enough money, not enough time, not enough people, really exacerbated. I have a whole chapter in my book about the impact of AI and social media. So these are the things that we're working with. And when that happens, we don't just shove down the experience, we shove down the fear, the connection, the sense of an interconnected being. So we become separate. When we become separate from each other, we become separate from God. That's what's actually happening. So that's the only way that I can say that to answer your question, is that we have separated ourselves, from each other, from spirit, from God. And that is what happens when we lose this fragmentation, is taking a part of our soul. So how do we grow that soul, that natural knowing? Well, first of all, to go back to the other thing you said, the head has had a coup over the heart. That's not the way it's supposed to be set up. The heart is the one that runs the head and the emotions and the body. So, every scripture is
yeah.
pointing to
So,
that.
so let me then mirror this back. because you have clarified it for me. You have answered my question, and with clarity, and I could say, well, I've always been on the verge of having the answer, but now I get it. Now I get it. Actually, for the first time in my long life, now I get it. What I'm hearing you say is that in the Garden of Eden, God experientially was with Adam and Eve. When they were given the word, in the beginning was the word. When God elevated us from the animal level by giving us language, which is the beginning of higher thought, we were able to conceptualize, we were able to intellectualize, we were able to form an idea in our head about who and what God is, right? The first thing that we were asked to do was name the animals. We began to give names to the animals. We can think of ancient cave paintings and man's initial exploration of his surroundings and beginning to sort of frame, maybe through pictures, what these different animals were and their distinctions. But now we had language and we could form concepts about reality, but those concepts were not reality. And so whatever idea we formed in our head about God, that is not God. And if we become attached to our own idea about a thing, let's make it personal. When people began to doubt your innocence and they became of the opinion that you were in fact responsible for the death of your wife, that was the big separation. When we form a false concept in our head about who and what God is and what he's doing, who and what we are, right? Our nakedness, whatever that false concept is, that's a false idol when it comes to God, and that separates. And no longer are we experiencing reality. We are engaging with our false conception of reality. But that conceptualization is our groping to understand more fully. But our desire to understand more fully is actually taking us away from the experience of the thing, the reality.
Yeah.
Now that's me intellectualizing it, and maybe that your mileage may vary in the audience, but but when you said the head has, performed a coup, the head has taken over versus the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm processing.
Yeah. No, it's a great area that you're going in. So first of all, this separate self gets created. So we are all traumatized. There's individual, familial, there's ancestral, lots of legacy burdens, lots of things handed down, and there's collective. And that creates an identity. And that's the false self, is this identity. I think of Martin Buber, the move from I, you to I, thou. That connection is the connection with God. If I'm seeing anyone for anything less than the mystery of God, then I'm blind in some way. So I have to actually really be aware of that language. There's an ancient Aramaic. Remember when we used to say, "Was abracadabra, you're a rabbit"? As a kid, we would play magic tricks. That actually has a very significant spiritual from spiritual texts from the Aramaic. It's arak adhabra, means I create as I speak. I create as I speak. So you could say the world that I live in is the one that comes out of my mouth. But of course, that's formed in this shaping of my sense of separate self. And a lot of that, comes from very early childhood development. But this separate sense of separate self, this is really the spiritual transformation that is the subject-object transcendence, that I transcend that separation. So like I said, you show up on my nervous system, I show up in your nervous system. My capacity to know you is limited to my capacity to know myself and the mystery that's outside of myself. Then we can really begin to connect, because it's no more just between us, it's intraconnected, not interconnected. Interconnected means that we're connecting like this, but intraconnected means we have become whole, in my sense, in the face of God, by letting ourselves go beyond the limits of our own belief about who we are. So the limits that have been building year after year, you look at the wars that are going on, they're all unfinished past. When you talk about trauma, that's all it is. It's unfinished past, whether it's individual, ancestral, or collective. It's unfinished cycle. I got scared, I suppressed that, and it's lodged in my body, and it's lodged in the body of humanity. And it's like if you lived in your in an apartment and you never left your apartment, and you're in an apartment building and you lived inside of an apartment, and somebody said, "Hey, what's the building that you're living in look like?" He said, "I don't know. I've never been out of the apartment." That's kind of what it's like, I'm living in this apartment called me and my identity, and I'm not seeing the world for the majesty and mystery. I love this, the mysterious, that living into the not knowing, which allows us. So there's so much in there, and the work I do with relational intimacy, which is intimacy towards myself, towards others, towards the world, towards nature. That in our work, we do a thing called feeling myself, feeling you, feeling me, and the space between us. That's the healing thing that needs to happen. And we have our rugged individualism, which is killing us. This sense of separate self. There's a big difference between the individual and individuation, because if in that early time, if I have that sense of being felt, seen, heard, held, and protected, then I individuate myself. It's not individualism. That's what's killing us. I want mine. It's mine. I want this and I want that. And I'm going to protect myself from you getting any of that. Well, that's nonsense, because it all belongs to the kingdom of heaven, right? It's so.
Well, and let's. I want to get back to something you said earlier, and by the way, thank you. This is all wonderful. On what you mentioned, white privilege, and yet you did suffer sequential challenges, trauma. You talk about trauma in a sense as a blessing. I'm oversimplifying, because the divine creation allows it to be diffused and later reintegrated. So today's trauma, or excuse me, you mentioned scarcity. The scarcity today in America is largely not material scarcity, even for those who feel like they are somehow suffering under the existence of white privilege. This is a relative scarcity. This is a perceived scarcity. It used to be called envy or even covetousness, right?
Yeah.
To want to have the things that others have and to be dissatisfied with what you have. So this is a perception that, in my view, the problem I have with even the term white privilege is the path out of your own suffering is not to get what you want. You follow me?
Oh yeah.
But to not desire that which others have.
Yeah. Well, this individualism leads us to the sense that I have to have something else to be whole. That scarcity, that separate self, that individualism, as opposed to individuating. When I individuate and I have a healthy childhood and a healthy history in my lineage, or I'm working to overcome those things by integrating. But overcoming is not the right word, because it's really, in order to heal ourselves, we need to allow ourselves to feel the things, not to get rid of the things that happened in the past, but to fully feel them, because then they become just presence. It's, yeah, that happened. Yeah, my wife was murdered. I had a lot of things that happened in my life, but they're not running my life anymore. And so that's really important. The integration process isn't getting rid of something or fixing something. It's recognizing the incredible intelligence of our nervous system and our humanity to actually suppress things and then to bring them up, to heal them when it feels safe enough. So most of us are running because we don't feel safe. And you can't outrun fear. Nobody, Jesse Owens, cannot outrun fear, and neither can you, because it's a message that's saying, hey, here's a place that you need to pay attention to. Fear heightens our awareness. And like I see here, fear, and then we come back to security, to safety. Fear, security. That's how we expand and grow. We have to titrate. We have to allow ourselves to feel these parts that were yucky. We call it the shadow. Jung called it the shadow, Carl Jung. That, those parts that we don't want to recognize or look at in ourselves, and surely we don't want anybody else to see them, that we have suppressed. That, in fact, he said, where the shadow is, that's where the work is. And that's
Right.
where the work is here in for humanity right now, is to, even if you hate what somebody's saying and you have completely different, can I be with you respectfully in love, even though I don't agree with anything you're talking about? Can I listen to you as a fellow human on a spiritual path that is opening to love, is opening my heart, is managing my heart from my life from my heart versus my head? And that, and to go back to meditation, we have to slow down. We have to soften. We have to allow ourselves to take the time to really feel the movement of spirit in our body and our soul. And as we do that, the capacity of our soul actually grows. The more I complete this, I call it after time, these unfinished parts of myself, the more I can complete them, the more capacity. It looks like space, more capacity, more stillness, more presence. So integrated past shows up as more space, as presence, as stillness. Unintegrated past shows up as destiny. I'm bound to do the thing over and over again until finally I go, oh my God, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's insanity. So I don't know if that.
Wonderful. Well, no, this has been wonderful. You've unpacked and I assume for the audience, you've unpacked some things for me that I've been chewing on for a very long time, and this has been incredibly helpful. I want to, in the remaining few minutes here, talk about God and the divine. You mentioned Jung. He talked about the collective unconscious. I studied a little bit into Jung. What was his, but you perhaps know more about him. What was his view of God and the divine? And what is your view of God and the divine? And how does that play in? Because my audience, a lot of religious people in my audience, you might view yourself as spiritual. I have a lot of religious people, and some of this is a stretch to move from religious to spiritual or connecting directly to the divine versus through practice. You follow me? So what's your view of God and the divine, and how does that play in here?
Yeah. It's a great question. So for me, when I talk about soul, first of all, soul is what we come into the world, our capacity, that the God-given capacity that we have as a human being. And so, and we also have an identity, a personal identity. So the more we can remove the lenses of this individual self and open ourselves to the mystery of the world, we're opening ourselves to God. We're opening ourselves to the divine revelation. When I get these parts that are more integrated, more settled in me, then I have the capacity, and God speaks through me. And the more space I have, the more capacity my soul has to make a difference in the world. And you talked about, there's a lot of the will to receive. When we aren't in touch with our true nature, which is our God nature, our thou, then we think that there's something outside of ourselves that's going to fulfill. So we are stuck in this will to receive. But really, as we develop our spiritual, religious, whatever you want to call it, our capacity to love is basically at the heart of it. The more we do that, the more we feel that natural capacity to give, the desire to give, to be grateful, to have faith. I didn't have faith as a young person, and it grew with my ability to honor life itself, to honor my ancestors, to bow down regardless of what happens to the life that's been passed down through generation after generation or generation, which is really the design, is how humanity evolves. And one of the things that stops us from evolving, and it's a whole other subject I don't want to open now, but I would just mention is
Yeah, mention it because we'll have you back to unpack that, but go ahead.
to deal with habits. Habits are crystallized structures. They're important. We need them to walk. We need them to take care of ourselves. But we have many, many of these crystallized structures that are the response to trauma that keeps us in these cyclical redundancies, and that's the soul trying to grow.
Well, yeah, because whatever the good habit was that got us out of disaster is today's good habit is tomorrow's bad habit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, especially if it's cognitive, and I say, I got this because of that, instead of honoring the mystery that said, here's something to move through. Oh, you want to be challenged in your life? You want a little suffering? Here, try this on and see how you're going to do with that. And people who have had immense suffering often are the people who wake up and go, wait, I am a child of God, and I am here to give to the world, and I am here as loving awareness. And as long as I can live, and the thing you brought up about, how can I say love and then hate, at the same time, I have to love all those parts of me that I don't really like, and that fear of death, and the fear of not being enough, and the fear of being abandoned, and all of those things that are residue of unfinished past, which is trauma.
Well, Michael, that has to be a wrap, because as I look at the clock, this has been so fascinating. I mean, I've just been mesmerized almost listening to you, and it's been wonderful. I still have to air a sneak peek for next week in the last couple of minutes here. So at this point in time, all I can say is thank you. I'd love to have you back to continue this conversation. Namaste. And to the audience, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. Michael, thank you. We'll be in touch soon. If you want to stay and chat for a moment after we go off the live show, I'm just going to air this sneak peek, and we'll see everybody next week. Same time, same place, 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern. That's 5 a.m. for Michael out in the Pacific zone. And of course, we're also on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central. We'll see you next week. Hey everyone, it's Wade Franson, host of Created in the Image of God. I'm here with another sneak peek. This is episode 181, airing on September 30th, Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Central. I'm here with Dean Simone, who is a self-proclaimed Christian non-dualist, or we might say tongue-in-cheek, a Catholic Taoist, and he's got an amazing perspective on the Bible. The title of the show is Myth or Metaphor? Does the Bible provide access to truth, or is it a barrier to understanding reality? Welcome to the studio, Dean.
Glad to be here.
Well, Dean, you came to my attention because you've been in film. You've been a major star in some pretty big commercials. You've also got a band that tours, and you're kind of a Renaissance man, and yet in talking to you, there's this solid core, centered core, despite Hollywood, despite music industry, that focuses on our purpose in life and spirituality. How do you balance, all that riotous living, I say jokingly, and your spiritual nature?
Well, no riotous living in this household, that's for sure. I feel like it's always about know thyself, as Jesus said, physician, heal thyself. So I've always found that being centered, being in touch with how I feel about things has always helped me navigate through a lot of strange ways that are out here in Hollywood. But there's also a lot of really good people out here, and there's also a lot more light than I think people really realize. So there's the kingdom of heaven is within. That's Christian non-duality. The kingdom of heaven in here.
Well, we've also, begun to unpack that, peel the layers off the onion around getting to that reality, what it really means to be Christ-like, what it really means to be sovereign as a human being while submitting to the light and avoiding darkness. So give us a hint of what people will learn and hear when they tune into the show on September 30th.
Well, I think that when it's said that we're made in God's image, that I believe that that's not really talking about that we walk on two legs and we have faces and eyes, but I'm talking about the sovereignty of God and that indomitable spirit, and God being something that is not a being, but God is being. So that what it is that we're searching for is something beyond the metaphor. Nothing's wrong with the metaphor. The metaphor is a means for us to get to the truth. The truth is what it's all about. That's the whole ball of wax right there. So if we can remain open to whatever the metaphor is without getting hung up on the metaphor, then I think that we can know ourselves, not the dean or the weight self, but the one that's deeper, the one that is the larger self that connects us all. I think that's where the truth comes. And I feel like when we're speaking with each other, we're going to have some opportunity to delve into that and get a closer look.
Wonderful. Well, there's nothing I can add to that. That was said so well and so succinctly. All I can tell you is to be there at 8 p.m. Central on September 30th.